Welcome to the Cascadia Daily News. We're here in the Cascadia Daily News newsroom in downtown Bellingham with Dan Purdy, candidate for Whatcom County Executive. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Purdy.
Thank you for having me, Dean.
I'm Dean Wright. I'll be moderating the discussion. With me are Cascadia Daily News Executive Editor Ron Judd and publisher Cynthia Pope, who comprise the newspaper's editorial board. Also with us is Cascadia Daily News reporter Julia Lerner, who covers the campaign and environment issues. And I'd like to thank our partners at nonprofit community radio station KMRE, who make this video possible. You can find them at 88.3 on the FM dial or streaming at kmre.org. In covering this election, Cascadia Daily News is using the Citizens Agenda approach, in which readers have been asked to identify the issues they want the candidates to talk about. Ron, can you talk briefly about the Citizens Agenda approach and the process the newspaper will use to make endorsements?
Sure. This is our second year of using the Citizens Agenda program, which has been used successfully by various media organizations around North America for the last decade as a way to shift the focus of election coverage away from horse race style coverage about issues that candidates or their handlers especially are putting out. I don't know that our local candidates have a lot of handler help, but they have some. So we try to step away from that and employ this process in which we, several months before the election, solicit questions from readers and reader voters about what they want candidates to be talking about throughout the election season. We amass those into a giant list, which is then voted on by readers and shrunk down to their priority issues, and those are some of the ones that we've sent to you on a questionnaire, and you've given us some responses, so we'll give you a chance to elaborate on those. We feel like it's been very successful. Readers have found it to be useful, and we use the material in two ways. One, this interview, which is on the record. We're not writing about the interview, but if you make news, we'll report it. As the current county executive can probably attest. I was sitting here a couple of days ago and talked about emergency preparedness for wildfires, and then we had one, and we used that for our story, which was convenient for us. We use the interviews to sort of form the basis of our decision on whom to endorse, but we also use them as a way to provide answers about topics to our reporters as they're doing their separate coverage, news-based coverage of the campaign. And so they keep those questions in the back of their minds when they do interviews with you and at public forums and those things. And that's how the program works. And we really appreciate you participating in it.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
Well, I'm going to go through the first four, I don't like to call them the winning questions, but the questions that readers voted as the ones they were most interested in. The first one is on homelessness, the homeless crisis. And you noted that in your administration, you would balance public safety and responsible spending with a compassionately firm approach to homelessness. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more what you mean by compassionately firm.
Sure. So homelessness is a multifaceted issue. It stems from many different things. It's not one or two things. And so I feel that if you look at our history, especially back over the past 25 years, we haven't gotten ahead of homelessness. In fact, it's gotten worse. In Whatcom County alone, between 2022 and 2023, we've actually had double-digit growth in homelessness, and I think that's unacceptable. What I would like to do is I'd like to take a stronger approach and remind us that these are our brothers and sisters. These are the people that are our family members, and we're all at any point on the razor edge of being in a similar situation. So from my perspective, what I'd like to see is a complete intolerance for homelessness. I was walking the neighborhoods today, and I was speaking with an individual who came to the door, and he told me that he had experienced homelessness, and the only reason he got out of it was because his parents were, benevolent enough to let him back in. But of course, he was with his partner, and he was unable to continue, living with that individual. So I think at any given point, we have to just say as a society, what do we want? What do we want to look like? Whether it's a Bellingham or a small city out in the county, what do we want to be as Whatcom County? I answer that question as, I want everyone to be sheltered. I want them all to have, food in their bellies, but I also want them to get the help that they need. And we can talk more about that as we go forward.
Yeah, as this is a real pressing problem, not just for this community, but for communities around the country. And I'm wondering if any local government really has the resources to deal with this, since so many of the issues are really almost macroeconomic. Yeah. And it kind of gets to one of the other questions on affordable housing. Can a local government really effectively deal with this? What can you do?
I think absolutely, but we need a coordinated plan. I know that there's a lot of special interests and there's different viewpoints and different perspectives out there, but this is one thing where we really have to come together as a county and talk about what's working and what isn't, and have a real honest and open conversation. From my perspective, the things that are working need to be done better, and they need to be funded. The things that are not working, regardless of the individuals or the organizations who are actually tied or connected to that, I think that they just need to accept that we have to move on from that and get to the 2.0 or the 3.0 version of whatever that is, so that we can impact people's lives. I think the worst case scenario is that this becomes a cottage industry for us, and it's something that we just tolerate over time, and the problem continues to grow. I don't think it helps anyone, but more important, it doesn't help the person. I passed about a dozen people today living on the street. Several were in tents. It doesn't help them when they're in this every day. Like, every decision that they've made, every footstep is impacting their day. We get to come back into our air-conditioned homes, our air-conditioned cars, and move on from that. We might wag our heads and we might look down the bridge of our noses, but we still haven't done anything to pause it or to stop it. And I think that's the intolerance that I'm talking of. We need folks to take this more seriously. Now, more to the point, I feel that there is a great opportunity for the faith-based organizations that are out there that have already made this, they've baked it into their DNA, for them to rise up. Now, that's going to be a private-public partnership. It may not be something that necessarily a county government or a city government funds, or maybe it is. I don't quite know yet what that would look like. But I know in talking with the Lighthouse Mission, who is a faith-based organization, I think that Hans there, the executive director, has a tremendous plan. And that involves three things. It involves outreach, recovery, and then restoration. I want to add two more in there. One of them would be intervention. I think that as a society, as people in our neighborhoods, we tend to say, well, that's their rights, that's their freedom, let's not impinge or impose. But at some point, we have to look at the numbers and the scoreboard. We're not making progress. So if we intervene and we give them the mental or the behavioral programs that I plan to invest in, and if we give them a pathway, I think that's probably the first thing. And then, of course, that leads to treatment, which is the second really important key. So let's take what Hans has said and what the Lighthouse Mission does very well. Let's take outreach, intervention, treatment, recovery, restoration. And I think you've got a pretty good plan here.
So in terms of, you mentioned that keep the things that are working and get rid of the things that are not working.
And maybe not get rid of them is the right way to say it. Maybe it's more of a...
change them.
We do like a download, Dean, right? Like we say, okay, let's do like a scoreboard or a dashboard and just kind of figure out what is working, what's not. And then maybe take pieces of that, what is working, and then build upon it. Yeah.
So in terms of what is working, things like what the Lighthouse Mission is doing,
yeah,
what the faith-based organizations are doing, are there other things that are working now?
In terms of
addressing homelessness?
Well, youth homelessness is a giant problem for us, and obviously we've got several organizations that are geared towards that. In my conversations with Lydia's Place, they had a goal that they were going to end family homelessness, and now they have 200 people on a waiting list. And so I think that programs like that need to be funded, and they need to attack those things, because youth homelessness is a growing concern, especially between the ages of 18 to 24. This breaks my heart. I have 3 teenagers, and they're that close to that age group, right? And so I couldn't imagine what would happen if, Allison or I were not able to provide for them, or they made decisions in their lives that wouldn't sustain their present lifestyle. I don't know what would happen to them. They would be consumers of this, these services. I think county government and city governments need to partner and get closer together and stop pretending like we've got these jurisdictions, because homelessness impacts us all. So let's sit down at a really high level and create some type of strategic plan that says, this is our goal, this is who we are as Whatcom County, and it feeds into the broader strategic plan that I plan to implement in January.
We have a homelessness task force.
I love it. We can call it a Delta task force, because it's going to be really narrow and focused, and it's not going to be politicized to the point where there's fiefdoms or kingdoms, but rather it's these are the folks that really need our help, and they're going to be involved and part of the decision-making process.
Okay. The second question that readers were interested in had to do with Lake Whatcom and the safety and potability of the drinking water there. One of the things you mentioned was that you would review the county's potential acquisition of key watershed buffer lands. Does that mean that you would support the acquisition of more land to provide a buffer for Lake Whatcom?
Within the confines of the law and my understanding of what is possible, yes. Yeah, because, would you like me to take that further?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, there's actually two issues at hand when you talk about the water, the potable water reservoir. We have a state mandate to reduce phosphorus. And phosphorus comes from a lot of different places. We're phosphorus, it's an element. It's in the periodic table, the charts. We've been managing the watershed very well. That's on land, so the exterior areas. And we've got waterways that come down from all over. I think there's 25 different inlets that come in. Mount Baker being our primary source of water and sediment and such. And then there's other tributaries and whatnot, which certain districts will help us manage, and the city and the county. My understanding in talking to water experts is that it's great to take care of the land and the outside areas, but it's in the water that also needs the help. That's where we measure, that's where we take samples, and that's where it needs to really be resolved. There's two different treatments that I'm aware of, and I'm sure that there's dozens more. It's not my certification, and it's certainly not my background or education. But in talking with the people who are experts, what I'm hearing is that you can do chemical treatments, and that means dosing the water, and you can use different types of solutions. One is called alum, and the other is called Eurostrat, I believe. We'll have to fact check that, because I don't know if that's the right pronunciation of it. And basically it's a boat. You got outriggers, and you've got some type of sprinkler system on the back. You drive up and down like you were mowing a lawn or shoveling a driveway, and you sprinkle this chemical agent, and that is a safe alternative to reducing the phosphorus. There's YouTube videos all over, and it's really interesting, especially in Kitsap County and then Southern California. They've got some success around much smaller lakes. Our Lake Whatcom Reservoir is 500,000 acres. I think it's 10 miles in one direction. At one point, it might even be 13 miles, if I've got my facts right. And these are much smaller scales, maybe 10%. However, they've been able to recreate on the lake, with personal watercraft. They've been able to, continue to swim and have good times in summers, which is what we like to do as Americans. Yeah. But there has to be a treatment as well, and that will help get rid of the blue algae. I think it's called cyanobacteria. And then there's also other things in terms of that phosphorus that are at the bottom or on the base of the lake. I think it's called the topography of the lake, and that's where we have something called legacy sediments. Legacy sediments are built up over time, and it's basically an accumulation of all of our sins from the past, including the coal operations that we had on I think it's the southeast portion of the lake. And of course, phosphorus gets trapped in there, and it just creates this recycling of its own self. That needs to be addressed as well, but you can't do that on the watershed. You got to do it in lake with chemical treatment. Or the other alternative is some kind of like mechanical apparatus, and that can be something that oxygenates the water or puts different types of elements, which is way beyond my 11th grade physics and chemistry classes, but that's another way to attack this. Mm-hmm. So keep doing what we're doing on the land, do more in lake, and treat this. And then when things get pulled and go downstream, into our 24 million gallon water treatment plant, that's when we are able to have the safe drinking water for about half of our residents, right?
Okay.
in the county, yeah.
Two questions that really captivated our readers had to do with Peace Health.
Yeah.
The response was just overwhelming on this issue, having to do with how Peace Health has cut services, its monopolistic, the fact that there's only one hospital here, it has a tax-exempt status. Let's just treat that as one question rather than taking two here. A lot of solutions have been proposed there, but what do you think of the idea of establishing a public hospital district to help perhaps form another hospital?
Sure. I mean, if that's what the people want, and that's the most efficient way to deliver services, let's explore it. Let's workshop it. Let's get in there. I know that Bellingham, the Bellingham mayor and city council had addressed that tax-exempt status back in 2014. I believe that you reported on it, and the people had overwhelmingly said, hey, we gotta let's negotiate our way out of this. Is my understanding of that. So I think that's where we came up with the settlement of keep this tax-exempt status, but keep moving forward in a negotiated deal. I don't know a whole lot about public health districts or whatnot, but I do know that at the state level there are mandates and there are RCWs around, what the rules are around the hospitals. There's different assessments that are necessary. They regulate from a population size exactly how many healthcare facilities I guess we're allowed or what we need. There's some type of need determination. And in addition to that, we have to really closely, look at that from a state perspective so that we're in compliance with law. As far as Peace Health and their actions, it's a compliment sandwich. My eldest son had appendix surgery 2 weeks ago. 2 in the morning, hey Dad, Mom, I'm not feeling so hot. Okay, take a Tums, 3 o'clock in the morning, I don't really feel that great. Can we take a look at this? Sure, here's a Tylenol. And then over the course of the next 12 hours, we found ourselves going through 3 different facilities and ultimately ended up in the emergency department having his appendix out. Fortunately, he wasn't septic, but imagine, right? I needed those services when I needed them. So thank you, Peace Health. Thank you to all of the doctors and to all of the nurses and all of the staff that were there to care for my son's needs when we needed it, when we needed to consume that service. Another compliment is they've just, devised 24,400 square feet of new space up in Linden on the Badger Road. That's a new facility for the residents in the North County. Very convenient. I live a mile away from it. Another 17,000 square feet that they're building for the Women's OB/GYN facility, which is down on 220 Birchwood. So these are the things that they're doing. They're investing in our community, right? Those are all positives. They should be lauded and be thanked, for what they've done. They're also doubling the square footage of the emergency department at the Bain Hospital. Boy, we have a long way to go, though, in terms of the work. They canceled the palliative care program without our consent, without community involvement. How does a public entity not receive input, or how do they not talk to the voters before doing something? Their voice of the customer, where was that? I don't understand what they did and what they didn't do, but I do know that they didn't consult me and my family when they canceled the asthma and allergy services that we consume. Yet another, same kid, right? So these are all of the things that I think that people should be in uproar about, and obviously they are in the citizens' agenda.
They certainly were in an uproar over the end of the palliative care program, and now Peace Health has promised to bring it back after that uproar.
Well, what they've promised is they're going to bring back a more sustainable program, and they haven't defined that to me yet.
Right.
I want to know specifically what are the elements that we had, what are the elements that they're going to bring, and then what's the gap? Because a more sustainable program is not replication of where we were. Mm-hmm. Obviously, that didn't cash flow for them. And I understand from a business perspective, because that's who I am too. I mean, I make business decisions every day. But from their perspective, they've got a public trust that they need to maintain. And I want to hold them to account and be accountable to that. So part of my plan is that we open negotiations at a county level that talk about these types of things, and we put them on really strong service level agreements Again, dashboards, scorecards. I want to see performance guarantees so that if for any reason they dip below that as a matter of delivery of their services or for whatever reasons, that we understand and they understand very clearly that there is a remuneration to the people that have this tax-exempt status in their favor. In addition to that, I want to see that asthma allergy program. I don't know what it would look like because I'm not a doctor and I don't run a healthcare system, but I want to see what that would look like in terms of that gap again. I know that I've got a kid who really needs that service. Try to take a breath and the service isn't there, or the medication, or the the doctor's prescription isn't present. I mean, that's not even a political topic any longer.
Yeah. Clearly an issue that really affected people.
Can I follow up on that quickly?
Go ahead.
In terms of the negotiation concept, obviously the county doesn't have jurisdiction to force really or compel PeaceHealth to do something. So what would compel them to participate in this process? Are you talking about the tax exemption itself as a something that would motivate them to do that, or is there something else you have in mind?
I think the tax exemption is one lever that the cities would obviously hold. I think at a county level, this is what I don't want. I don't want us being divided anymore. I don't want us talking about national politics. I don't want us talking about things that divide us. What I want to do is I want to solve real problems. And here's 5 on the citizens' agenda that if we all came together in a comprehensive plan, county, city, concerned citizens, and then our strategic partners like PeaceHealth and other medical providers, if we can come together and figure these things out and work them out and then document them and at some point legislate them, right, through county council and through the city councils, boom, there you go. We've got what the citizens want, what the people want, and what they deserve. All they want is health care on demand when they want it, when they need it. And I believe our strategic partners must deliver that as a license to operate in Whatcom County. Not in a certain city, but as Whatcom County. So I want to elevate the conversation to my office and to bring everyone together in order to collaborate on what that would look like. And that includes our key stakeholders. It includes the partners themselves. PeaceHealth has to be able to talk to this issue, but it's not going to be a very comfortable conversation because you've seen what the majority of citizens in Whatcom County want, and I intend to give it to them.
Affordable housing, easier said than done. And you talk about a number of steps you could take to mitigate the affordable housing crisis, but I'm just wondering if, again, this is one of those things that's affected by some real macro issues here. Bellingham has, and Whatcom County has, housing prices that are more in line with a metropolitan area.
Yes.
But we have an economy that is not in line with what you see in a metropolitan area like Seattle. So again, is there much that county government can do to really alleviate this?
Absolutely. I think what you're seeing is the result of inaction from a previous administration. Under my administration, it's all about pro-growth policies, and we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to do it at the expense of our ag lands or in terms of our environmental impact areas. I'm not saying, and I'm not advocating for growth's sake. What I'm talking about is, again, at a high level, a strategic plan that strategically directs us and says, today we're 230,000 residents on the book. That's just Census Bureau data, but we know that there's about 5,000 people, about 1,059 through homelessness in Bellingham, and then probably another 2,500 encounters that we've had, and then another 2,500 people who are probably couch surfing, living in cars, or we just can't quantify them because they don't identify themselves and we can't get to them. So let's call it 235,000 people. They've all got to live somewhere, and I said earlier about the homelessness issue, I want everyone sheltered. So from my perspective, pro-growth means let's use the urban growth areas that we've already designated, and let's start moving into that in that direction. Bellingham has a preference, is my understanding, for more vertical living spaces. I was listening to Joe Tian yesterday, and I heard a guy call in, and he says that this caller says that everybody should be living in studio apartments. I don't subscribe to that personally, but he does, and he's in Bellingham. Okay, let's talk about that. If that's what Bellingham wants, let's go vertical. If that's where the space constraints are, let's talk about that. Out in the North County, and a lot of the folks that I represent out there, they want the way that they were raised and that they were, that they were reared. 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, cat in the window, dog in the yard, little play area for the kids. That's how they wish to live. We're all Americans. We get to choose what we want. And that's the beauty of Whatcom County, is that we all chose to be here. I'm a transplant from Philadelphia. I didn't want to live there anymore. So that's part of what I'm talking about with pro-growth. In addition to that, we've got to streamline the permitting process. And this is not a knock on anybody who's doing their job every day as a county or a city employee. These are folks that get up every day and they give us services. What I'm talking about is I want to establish a better way to measure our performance. Rather than having this blasé attitude towards, well, the law says, or we can't do this, or we shouldn't, or we don't want to. That doesn't work with me under my administration. We're going to do things because the citizens have needs. They need more housing. They need lower level housing. The U.S. Census Bureau still says that Whatcom County was at $1,219 for average rent. Nobody I'm talking to is paying the bargain basement price of $1,219 per month. The people in this room are not paying that in their mortgages, in their rents, or otherwise. So, we don't even have a federal, oversight here, or helping us, or guiding us, even with the data. So, from my perspective, we've got to get that permitting process more streamlined. And that's where I'm going to really shine. I've got a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and it's all about process. And the DMAIC process is we attack problems, we go after them, we define it, we measure it, we do everything that's necessary to ultimately get to the point of control, only in terms of that process works for the people going through it. And then when we stress that process, when we get more permits going through the process, that's where we start to win, because more developers are able to do what they need to do. More residents are able to do what they want to do with their own lands. Again, coming from the perspective that we're all Americans. We have these inherent rights, and we don't want to be restricted by all of these outside factors that prevent us from doing things. The one idea that I want to workshop and explore more is an automatic permit approval process. And what that would mean is, as a citizen, as a applicant, your permit will be approved in a certain period of time. And it's up to the county to say, hey, this doesn't quite jive, with the state or the local laws, or perhaps it doesn't have, the right completion of the application. Maybe there's something else in there where it's like a code violation, or even there's some type of legal issue, right? Whatever it might be, there's a time period, and that's on the county. That's on me to make sure that if my departments, and I'm talking about planning department now, if they're not getting through that streamlined process in a certain period of time, that the citizens don't lose. I've talked to probably a dozen people now that are sitting on 2-year wait periods. Their permitting fees, because of inflation and a host of other things, have gone up not hundreds but thousands of dollars. The cost of the materials for just building their deck have now gone up exponentially. It's not right. It's not fair. And I think as an American in Whatcom County, you should be able to do what you want with your property as long as it's within the law, and of course within this strategic plan of what we want this place to be. I've got more. Can I keep going, Dean?
Keep going.
In addition to that, I want to be able to help with deregulation. Now, deregulation is a huge political term, and a lot of people will just cringe when they hear it. But it's the right word, because it really is taking away from. We don't want to have things that are on the book that we've duct taped and bubble gummed or put on administration after administration through different legislative mechanisms. Some things just don't jive anymore, and they don't make sense, or maybe we don't want to anymore, right? So I want to get to the point where we've got a collective review of our zoning laws. We're looking at the things that make sense, and we're just reducing and getting back to a not necessarily a blank sheet of paper, because we've got a lot of history and a lot of of people who have done some great things bringing us to this point. But I want to get back to the point where it makes sense again for the citizens and the people that want to do things with their property, and for the developers who are really going to help us overcome this issue of affordable housing. The land policies are in there, and there might be some surplus public land out there that we are aware of that would need to be reassessed, and maybe those are good places for us to take a closer look at it, putting more homes on, however we choose to define what a home is. Okay. Mm-hmm. These are the things that are going to ultimately stimulate the high-wage jobs. It's going to bring, as the president of the Bellingham Regional Chamber of Commerce says, more better jobs. And I love how the way Guy says that. We need more better jobs. These are the jobs that are going to pay higher salaries. They're going to attract more businesses. And the way it works, and I would love for you to explore the Laffer curve, as regulation decreases, tax base increases in terms of what happens, in terms of higher, revenues to the government, and people are able to do more with their land. They feel, and they're incentivized, and they're wanting to invest more, and that's what attracts more businesses. But it's kind of a, chicken and egg. We can't necessarily draw or attract more businesses to get us more better jobs without having the housing and reasonably priced housing to support their workforces.
Do you mind if I
Go ahead.
Sure.
So all of this, zoning and looking over some of these codes and deregulation aside, how do we attract the developer in the first place? Is it tax incentives? Is it how do we bring in developers to build what we need?
The developers are already here, Julia. And when I talked with the folks in Blaine, they've got a project, I think it was like 450 or 500 homes that they can't get through the Blaine City Council for whatever reasons. The permitting process there may be better than at the county level, or it may be worse. I don't know for sure. But the developers are here. They have things, they have plans in place, and they want to do these projects, but they can't, they need the stability of knowing what's coming. They can't get into a project on a Monday and then find out in 3 years, when they thought they were going to have a permit 30, 60, 90 days from there, they can't find out in 3 years that they're still in a limbo or an unknown status. And that's what I hope to resolve. I want to curb the backlog, and I want to create this new streamlined process that we agree on. And some of us may not agree, and that's okay. I'm okay with not agreeing with a lot of things. But getting that streamlined process so that when the next application, the new application comes through after we've alleviated the backlog, that it goes through a very stringent record that the county is on the hook for, not necessarily the person who filed it.
You talk about deregulation.
Issues?
I've covered a lot of government process, more than I care to think back on. And I've never really heard a candidate for public office who doesn't think it's a good idea to streamline permitting processes. I've also talked to a lot of the wonks who work in those permitting processes, and will show you on a sheet all of the state, federal, and other laws that they have to abide by in things like land use, environmental concerns. One person's unnecessary regulation is another person's barrier against carcinogenic stuff flowing onto their property. So it's all in the eye of the beholder, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy to say that, but do you have specific ideas other than saying the onus is on the county to step up and or disprove that somebody should get a permit, right? And like they have a right to the permit unless there's some legal issue, but there are going to be a lot of those legal issues. So I'm interested in what specific ideas you have to make that go smoother and faster for everybody's benefit.
I think it starts with a strategic goal, and that is we're no longer 235,000 people, and we have to shift and change our attitudes that if you're already in, that's it. Nobody else is allowed to come in. Think about it. If we were to grow 50%, that would put us at close to 350,000 people. If I said that out loud, which I just did, people's brains would melt. They would not want another, X number of people coming into the county. But that's where we're at. And I think what people need to understand is that within an hour and a half of where we live, there's 8.5 million people. Mm-hmm. So it's happening. Growth is occurring. We have to embrace that. And in order to do that, we've got to change the mindset and then right size for what we have to have and what we need. And that includes everything, Ron. I mean, it includes the infrastructure. We're moving right now towards an electrical grid. Great, let's do that. But I can tell you in some of the conversations that I'm having, the PUD doesn't know if we can do all of that at once. It needs to be a time-phased plan so that we get everything we want, but we got to build the infrastructure before we put all the vehicles on top of it and it starts drawing from it. It's just a physics problem at that point. But I don't think we're having those honest conversations about what can be done. So what I'd like to do is to collaborate with the persons that are responsible for these activities, get them all into one room, lock the door, don't order pizza, and just let's see how quickly we can get to these solutions.
But a lot of the permitting process is a direct response of state law that are outside the bounds and control of the county, of Whatcom County. You can't streamline that process and just say we're going to ignore the SEPA Act when it comes to this development or that one. So are you talking about things like more staff, or are there things that you can actually do as the county executive that would make that process go smoother, since you can't really just say it doesn't apply anymore? It'd be nice to deregulate back to a certain point and start over, but that isn't going to happen. So how do you make those permits flow more quickly from one end to the other as the county executive, I guess is what I'm curious about.
Yeah, so from that perspective, the first step is to evaluate the department. And as a Lean Six Sigma black belt, the first thing you do is try to identify the waste, right? You try to figure out where are things going sideways and what's not happening. I don't have any insight into how many people are doing the right things in the department, and it would be inappropriate for me to comment on that before I got into office and actually spoke with folks and interviewed them and talked about where their pain points and challenges are.
Sure.
Oftentimes, I acquired a company that had done 400 Kaizen events, and oftentimes the answer isn't more bodies, it's doing something better because it's the right thing to do, and you cut out the waste. And you do that through a whole host of different techniques. So I can't answer that specifically in terms of bodies, but I do know that once we get aligned on what the things that, are we working on the right problems? Are we working on the right solutions for those problems? Are we at a point where we're all moving in the right direction and not hurting each other with different things or different topics? Those are the things that I feel like that need to be addressed. And so it comes down to a little bit of the quantitative, but a lot of the qualitative as well. So in answer to your question, specifically, first 100 days, review the permitting department. And you're getting this first because I'm not going to announce that until 2 weeks from now. But that's the very first thing, is getting those permits and that process right-sized and streamlined. And then after that, it's really taking a hard look at the land use policies, the zoning, making sure that we can find opportunities to deregulate. But again, with the caveat, within the law.
Sure.
We have to do everything within the law. But then at that same point, I want to be advocating and lobbying to the state level and to the others who kind of control our destiny, to your point, that some of these things just don't match with what our citizens want anymore.
You mentioned also excess public lands. Are there any of those specifically that you have in mind that might have a better use for housing?
I don't have any specific ones.
Surplus, I'm sorry, not excess, but surplus.
Yeah, right.
Can't have an excess of public lands, but surplus.
Yeah, I don't have any specific plats that I'm thinking of,
Okay.
but I've got some ideas as what that could look like. It's just not for public comment at this point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know we all wanted to get to the jail. Ron?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dean. The jail is a big issue, obviously, not just in housing detainees, but in our entire approach to criminal justice. It seems like the community in Whatcom County has had a really vigorous conversation about that over the last several years, and a lot of it flows back to the jail because we have a facility that not everybody, but a lot of people on both sides of the political spectrum consider inadequate. And the question is, how do we fix that or replace it? So the simple question is, do you support the current tax measure to build a new jail? And if you are elected county executive, how would you then approach the dispensation of that fund that will build up from that excess sales tax that is not specifically tied to a size and number of beds in a jail?
Yes, I'm in favor of the new jail, and I really hope that the citizens are as well. It's something that we absolutely need. Right now, it's on the ballot for November 7, and everyone will have the opportunity to tell us what they think. This is a nonpartisan position that I'm in. So this doesn't have anything to do with political affiliation or party. What this has everything to do with is there are people in our community that would do us harm, and they need to be removed from society when they break our laws. It's up to the judicial branch of government to determine, what that is and when it happens and so on. But, for $137 million, which is where we're at right now with the estimate of the jail, we've been looking at anywhere from 400 and 450 beds all the way up to 700. And that's a fairly good-sized facility, seeing as how the present jail was built for, I think, 149. The new jail would be located out in the county, out in Ferndale on LaBounty Road. And the design, I think, is the critical element here. We're not trying to replicate what we've already done with a multi-level, top-down facility. I like the vision that our law enforcement and our strategic partners have right now. I like their thought process for a single-level modular system. And I think you've commented and written about this in your own paper. And when I speak with corrections officers and I talk with law enforcement about what they're seeing and what they want to see, I think we're on the right track. I feel very positive that we're all doing this for the right reasons. We're not doing it to simply incarcerate people that don't belong in the system, but rather we're doing it because there is an element of the population. As we grow, our jail system will grow because they do need to be removed for the heinous crimes that they will allegedly commit or otherwise be incarcerated for. To the tax portion of it, I don't yet understand what happened the first time around when we had the tax rate and it didn't go towards what we were trying to do now. This is not the first rodeo in terms of trying to get taxation for the bill. I don't understand what happened and where all the holes or the gaps were in the previous administrations and the people who were responsible for that. I don't know if we've even done a post-mortem or even a root cause analysis as to why we had all of these funds, and yet here we are today talking about not a lesser size or a lesser inflationary cost event, but rather now we're at $137 million. How do we get here? And how do we stop that so that we don't replicate that going forward? I feel like the modular system, and there's been examples of how this works in other states that I know that people that I've been speaking with have studied. And we've got some really dedicated people to this that I've actually personally contributed financially because I really feel like this is a strong issue. I like the fact that they want an open environment where if you're standing in one place, and it's typically from the vantage point rather of the corrections staff, that you're able to see a couple of tiers in a single room, high ceiling, of the cells that are there to make sure that you can control incarcerated persons from behaviors. Then they've also got the increased medical and behavioral services that are a part of that. So I don't know if this is the right term for it, but I look at it as like an open air bazaar, right? And so you have all of the things that you need, where you need them, when you need them, and that gives them line of sight to all of these different programs. And it makes it really easy for the people that are inside these walls. I took the last tour on June 30th. I was there right before one of the individuals broke out of the cell. And I think it happened on July 4th. Maybe you reported July 3rd. I don't remember the exact date, but it was bad. Inmate made it into the corridor, and that was scary because I've walked through that corridor, and law enforcement's there every day, and they're in danger. They're also doing time with these sentences. So from my perspective, having a jail that is humane as opposed to our existing conditions where there's no sunlight, there's no fresh air, there's black mold on ceilings, and especially around food prep and food delivery areas. Having something that is at a much larger scale and a much better tenable degree of having people around it, I think that's the way to go. We've got medical personnel that are in there. I want to say mid-20s, maybe as high as 30 people that are there on a continual basis that are assaulted. They're given all kinds of demeaning language, and you and I would never tolerate that in our workplace, and yet, here we are in that situation. So I'm in favor of this new jail. I like the way that we're headed. I feel that we need to spend a little bit more time talking to our corrections staff about their specific needs and what they would like to see, so that we don't do something stupid at a county level and saying, hey, this is what we built for you, go enjoy it, and we didn't talk to the people that are going to be walking it, running it, and being involved with it on a daily basis.
But there is a legitimate chance, given the public distrust that you mentioned about this, about the taxes for a jail in this county, that you could be elected county executive and have the jail that we have now, and be faced with running that jail indirectly. Do you have a plan for that, and how would you make that work another, however, 4 more years, I guess?
Yeah, there's actually 3 plans, right? The first plan is that we build a new one, but that still takes 3 to 5 years to build, so we need that plan. Then the other plans are including how do we remodel, retrofit, upgrade, or get us out of these conditions that we're in today. I personally feel that if we're not going to go all the way on this new jail, then we're going to have to make a significant investment in the present one. I don't think we can go any longer.
Yeah. So even if it passes, you're going to be faced with a span of time, like you said. So
it's a hybrid model. Yeah.
Those kind of accommodations are going to have to be made, obviously. So you're committed to that?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to be.
Good.
Like I said, we're overcrowded right now. We've got more folks as we grow in our population size. There's more folks that are going to be coming in. It's quite possible we're going to go through another COVID mandate here shortly, and that's going to cause all kinds of distancing issues and all of the rest, and we'll be back to where we were, a couple, 3 years ago. Yeah.
Good. Thanks.
Well, we've had some really heavy issues here, and we'll get some more heavy issues, but I just wanted to get to a couple of questions to kind of get to Dan Purdy, the man. We all have influences in our lives. Do you have any heroes, any heroines that have made a huge influence on you?
I was really fortunate in my life that there were several individuals who modeled the path before me as to what I wanted to become. I won't name them for public consumption, but I will say that these were men of faith. They were individuals who took a real interest in me as a young man. You have to understand where I came from. I was in the greater Philadelphia area, grew up just outside of the city on the north side. America started there. George Washington crossed the river. At the time, it was 20 minutes away from my house, but today it's probably an hour and a half to get there. I don't know. I'll be in Philly in a couple of weeks. I'll tell you how far it is. But these were men that took a real interest in me, and at a very young age, in my early formative years and in my teen years, they put me on a path, and I was really fortunate in that sense that they mentored me and coached me in some areas. Fast forward, I'm replicating a lot of the same things that they did. I went to work for very, very large corporations. I've worked for 5 Fortune 500 companies. And a kid from Philly doesn't necessarily leave their neighborhood, let alone get out and go to these, places of high repute. I'm coaching 30 teenagers every weekend, and I'm teaching them life skills because that's what was given to me. So I'm paying back exactly what was given to me when I was growing up. So that's kind of my foundation and where I've come from.
Okay.
Yeah.
One other issue that you and I spoke briefly about when we were just arranging this appearance, about how elections have become increasingly nationalized in the U.S. Local elections, down to this level, and this really intense polarization. Is there something about Whatcom County that can be different? Can we avoid that polarization? What do we need to do?
Yeah, it's really up to the individual to avoid it or to embrace it. And that's up for each person to make their own decisions. From my perspective, I'm just a guy. I'm married, I've got 3 kids, I've chosen a lifestyle, and that's what I know. I'm just trying to make it like everybody else. There are others out there that think a lot like I do in terms of, I believe that Whatcom County is the gateway to America. Remember, I grew up in Philly. I grew up where all of the historic artifacts were displayed, the emblems were there. I learned just by walking the streets, where the flags were sewn. I learned where the Declaration of Independence was signed. It's one of my favorite buildings. I went to Carpenter's Hall. This is years ago, Dean. I went to Carpenter's Hall. My father worked at 2nd or 3rd and Chestnut, I don't remember now. And I went to Carpenter's Hall, they had a museum there, and I bought for $9 a giant cast iron key that was supposedly, the front door of Independence Hall. All right, here's my $9. I walked over there. I put the key right in the front lock. They still have it. And I turned it, and don't you know that it unlocked.
It actually worked.
But there's a Schlag deadbolt on top. And so the park ranger at the time comes over and she says, this is her exact words, "Sweetie, that ain't gonna open the door. This is gonna open the door." And she pulled out her key and a Schlag lock and unlocked the deadbolt. No, I was in where history was made. So that's how I grew up. I believe that there's hope for America. I believe in Washington State, and I especially believe in Whatcom County. We are not so big that we can't get our arms around this thing with our 235,000 people and figure things out. I would like us to take more pride in our diversity in terms of our ancestral populations, our indigenous populations. I would like us to take more pride in our agricultural lands and our legacy. Many people in this room would probably know that we invented the berry tickler here, but maybe the folks out there, maybe they don't know how in some instances, in some circles that I'm running with, and the people that actually helped to invent these tools, they saved the grape and the raisin harvest in California. There's a whole museum down there dedicated to that at a very popular and very well-known brand. That's special about us. We're the start of the I-5. We're not the finish line, we're the start of the I-5. San Diego can have the finish line, but this is where things happen. This is where things come in, and I want us to really celebrate that. I'm really hopeful that we can become a larger part of newer industries. We've got some amazing industries that are around us, and I've talked before about how some of the products that we produce here are only one of maybe 5 different operations that are out there in the world, and it's right here in Whatcom County. We export 80 to 90% of the frozen raspberries to the nation, and they thank us for that. I want us to get to the point where we're creative, we're entrepreneurial, and we're taking a category leadership stance and position to showing the rest of I guess there's 39 counties, but the rest of the 38 counties in Washington State, and then the others out there in the US, what it's like to come together and shed this national conversation which divides us, and to put off that stuff that is dividing generations of people who lived, worked, and grew up here. There's a lot of things going on, and a really rich legacy that we have that I feel like we need to preserve.
Okay. One other question I have before I'm going to turn over to Julia for a minute. We've just had, or currently having, a wildfire at the southeast end of Lake Whatcom. We've had incredible floods in the last 2 years. We've been lucky here, but much of the country has had unprecedented heat waves. A hurricane has just moved through Florida, over waters in the Gulf of Mexico that are warmer than a bathtub, warmer than a hot tub. And we live in a coastal county here, so we're going to see more of this. What can the county executive and county government do to help mitigate the effects of the climate crisis here, or prepare for the effects of the climate crisis?
Yeah, I prefer to talk about the preparations because that's something I can control. Mm-hmm. In talking with emergency management, there's a lot we can do there. I mean, in November 2021, people's lives were significantly impacted, I think even more so than the previous floods that they've experienced. We continue to build in floodplains. I think we need to ask ourselves, do we still want to do that if we're not going to do other things? I don't feel like we've got the right budget and the right staffing in emergency management. Now, talking about the wildfire that we just had at I think it's the south end of the lake, that's all on DNR land, so we don't necessarily, have jurisdiction in those areas. And I've been getting updates from law enforcement and firefighting and others that have told me that, and they're prepped. I call them and I just say, hey, how is your team doing? What's going on? What do you need? What can I do? How can I use my platform, my influence to get you stuff? And they're like, yeah, DNR's got it all set up. They know we're here. Whatcom County Sheriff's Office did a great job of blocking off, Blue Canyon Road and keeping boaters off in certain areas so that the helicopters and the, I guess, other aircraft might be able to come in and dip and dose on the outside where the fires were burning. So we're participating in these things, but we're not necessarily taking the lead on that. In preparation, there's a whole host of environmental issues that I'm sure Julia knows really well that we need to talk about. We need to talk about them out loud, and it can't be divisive. It needs to be, okay, we know this is coming, what do we do? And that includes everything from thinning to undergrowth to, I talked earlier about some of the buffer lands, the watersheds. It includes things like the stormwater BMPs, the best management processes and whatnot. These are all things that we need to have open air conversations about to get public feedback, to get the best experts in government, people that know these things, these topics fairly well, to decide what actions are we going to take. I could go real broad or real detailed on this topic, but I want you to think about for a moment how stressed our local EMS and 911 system would be if we were to suddenly have one more event. Our first responders, many of them are volunteer. When I speak with them at these different events that I attend, I learn that they don't necessarily have all the equipment that they want or need to protect and preserve property and life. I understand that many of them are volunteers and they don't have the folks coming up through the ranks that are even interested in doing this type of lifestyle. And that's what it is. It's a lifestyle. It's not a job. We might be able to punch in from 9 to 5. I mean, many of us do not do that. But from an office environment, we could punch in and take a clock, but still others of us are out there on call on a regular basis. And it's really important that we have staging areas. One of the ideas that I have talked with others about, including emergency management, is maybe this is the time for us to pull in a public-private partnership and talk to the folks that already have acquired and have invested in the equipment that we'll need. I don't ever want to see a citizen in Sumas floating their neighbors out on their own personal watercrafts because the county wasn't there with the right equipment to do what needed to be done to protect their citizens. I don't want to ever see a Cat 950 loader pulling people up in their buckets, which we would never allow on a work site during normal times, but then carrying those people to safety because that's what was necessary, and those people came together as a community to protect their own. Unacceptable. And it comes back to this intolerance that I have for the county not taking the active part and doing the right things. I feel like I need to cast a broader vision with the right partners in what it is and what it means to be a part of this county. You should be able to know that when the next event happens, and it will, you should know that we have an active organization that is continually protecting and serving you, and that's coming from staged areas. You want specifics? Here you go. We need to have an indeterminate day, indeterminate quantity contract opened with many of our very large providers. We've got huge companies that are in this county that work inside and outside of the county during their normal courses of business. They've got laydown yards, they've got equipment yards. These are the things that Public Works may or may not invest in, but at a larger scale, let's get an inventory of all of that equipment that's already in county and then deploy it under these contracts that we will maintain to these individuals who can then help us, deploy and meet the needs that are necessary. Right now, we've got a very highly skilled, highly dedicated law enforcement, but we also have jurisdictional boundaries. You know what they are, but I think that when we press the button on emergency, that's when everyone comes together and says, okay, no more labels, no more political divisiveness. This is what we do to protect life and to preserve property, and this is how we do it. And it's not something we make up as we go, like happened in these last events. I mean, for Pete's sake, my family and I were sandbagging Sumas next to the very railroad cars that fell over the very 2-3 days later. We were in, after event, we were in the basement of a Spanish church. I was telling Andy, we were at the basement of a Spanish church picking up pinto beans in really large bags. And I'm not sure if you've ever smelled a pinto bean in submerged, disgusting water, but I can never eat that again because of, you're taking that and you're removing it and you're putting it in wheelbarrows, and there were so many people and volunteers that came out to do that. Where was the county in any of this? I'm getting word that maybe FEMA isn't going to come through on some of the monies that were promised to us. Maybe for whatever reason we're not going to be able to reimburse or to remunerate people that really need the help. Others are choosing to rebuild, and now their houses are on stilts, like we were down somewhere in the Gulf. This is not who we are, and I think that county needs to take a stronger leadership so that we're prepared, we're ready, we're organized, we're on guard, ready to go in the event of that crisis. Then, in crisis, we know exactly where our warehouses are, where our storage facilities are, where our shelters, whether they're barracks or shelters or whatever has been that rapid response, where they are, where they're going to be, where they're going to need to come out to, and then where is the secondary location if that area is not obtainable or inaccessible. Where does the equipment come in to help protect, preserve, and then after event, what is the action plan so that when we know at a county level that the first hour and a half is critical, but then the next 72 hours is kind of where things taper off, what happens for the resident at hour 73 and beyond as they're still living this giant mess where they've already gone through this traumatic event? We talked earlier about mental health and behavioral services, Dean. Going through a natural disaster is not the same as PTSD in a war zone or in some other area. There's specific differences. Where are the counselors that we need that are deployed to help these folks get through that mental portion of it, of the physical portion that they've just already experienced? There's a whole confluence of things that have to happen. I don't think we're ready. I don't think we have been ready. And that's, I read a book by Carl Kraus. He lives out in, I think, the county. And he wrote a book called The Waters Are Rising. And it documented specifically what happened in this last event and so on. And I think we need more Carl Krauses out there who are going to be able to help us work through the boots on the ground stuff so that we're prepared for the next one. Not 6 months from now, or even in January when I take office, but right now, what are we doing at this very moment to increase the budgets and the headcounts and the equipment sets and the right contracts to be able to do this? It's not a political issue. It's not up to one person to manage this. It's up to the existing county executive to take ownership and to lead us through that, because again, it could be any number of us. Just recently it was 2 lightning strikes. Imagine what happens when the big one hits Boulder Creek Fault.
Julia?
Yeah, I actually I wanted to follow up quickly on that, if that's okay. The climate crisis is not always the form of floods that leave hundreds of people homeless or massive fires that could take down our forests. Sometimes it's just, it's 100 degrees outside and no one has air conditioning, or it's the water's warmed up near the beaches and we can't harvest shellfish the way that, say, the Lummi Nation has done for centuries. What can the county do to combat some of those challenges related to the climate crisis?
Yeah, I think the county's already doing a lot of that. My understanding is that as we move towards the electric grid, we're reducing fossil fuels, we're reducing all types of historic legacy products that we no longer as a society choose to purchase. So I think demand, like just basic supply and demand, is taking care of a lot of that. At a state level, we've already got, I don't remember the exact date, I want to say it's 2035, 2034. Mm-hmm. I know it was more aggressive in California when they said it, but they're reducing their combustion engines in their products because that's what people are demanding. Okay. That's what people want, that's what they're going to get, and that's what drives business. Okay. In terms of what we're already doing as a county, a lot of this stuff, we only have 235,000 people, so really how much of this are we contributing to ourselves and individuals? How much of this is coming from other areas that we can't control? We know that weather patterns, and we know that influences from other more industrialized, unregulated areas cause these types of issues all over the world, and it impacts us. You talk about 100 degrees, I say light weights. I was living in Phoenix, Arizona before this, where it was 117 in the shade. 100 degrees, that's winter. No, I'm kidding. No, but on a serious note, for us in this area, it really is important. And you bring up the air conditioning and all of the rest. I don't have sprinklers in my yard or anything like that. I just let the lawn die. I think it's like 6 or 7 months out of the year, and where I live, people really kind of look down their nose at me. But we just choose not to. We don't want to use our natural resources for those functions. We choose to save and preserve, and I don't need a nice yard. What I need is for my kids to mow the weeds more, though. That's one thing. But with the shellfish and the water, there are people that are observing that, and we need to have a more broader discussion, I think, with the folks that are impacted by that. I don't have any specific ideas other than what the county is already doing. Mm-hmm. I know that we've recently hired a new climate manager. We've also had some new rules come in at I don't know if it was a county level or the city level anymore, but I think that at that point we've got things that we're already doing and progressing. My job is to listen to the complaints and the issues and the concerns of all citizens, regardless of political affiliation, regardless of what voting bloc that they belong to, because I don't see this as a political office. I'm listening to everybody and trying to understand their needs and then delivering what it is that they need in an effective program, in a hopefully cost-reductive way, in a manner as we get new technologies and we do more research. Yeah.
And you bring up, not using water when it's already hot out. One of the big challenges we're facing in the county, kind of looking ahead, is this battle over water rights adjudication.
Yeah.
What role does the county executive take in solving this?
Yeah. Do we have time?
We do.
Okay. So the water rights adjudication, and I can't say this enough, this is a tipping point for Whatcom County. We are about to have 24,000 defendants because of the state lawsuit that they're about to give us in about a year and a half. It was supposed to be this year, but I think there's been some delay. This is going to be the first time that the state is going to come after groundwater rights. It's typically always been surface water. And you want my answer? What my role is? I'm here to be the lead advocate for the 24,000 defendants, for the farmers who are going to be adversely impacted. I'm here for the Lummi tribe, who is going to be trying to figure out if they still have the same things that they thought they did in the Point Elliott Treaty of 1855. They've got rights to fish, but do they have rights to water now after we go through this giant battle with our state? Like, this is not a fun exercise that we're going to go through and everyone's going to be happy. This is an attack on Whatcom County from my perspective. Others may debate me, others may disagree with me, but I can't imagine that we would put our citizens through what Yakima Basin just went through over 35 years and say that's a positive thing. Who are the winners and losers in this? Let me pause there, because I might need a...
But what's the alternative to that, though, in your mind? I mean, there's only so much water to go around. It flows through very quickly. It's here one day, it's gone the next. And all of those co-defendants are competing for water internally amongst themselves right now. That's very clear.
And water, there's increasingly less of it. I know that's a weird phrase, but
No,
but there's less
I understand
of
what
it.
you're saying, yeah.
Yeah.
See, this is where I need more information, because what I'm hearing is that we don't have a water problem. We've got a water timing issue. We're sitting on, under our feet right now are an unknown, untapped reserve of aquifers and resources. I don't know how big that is. The state is about to tell us as they try to map it and they try to go through some type of high-tech, highfalutin way of figuring out exactly what it is under our feet. But the rules of the game, I don't think, are stacked in our favor. And I'll tell you why. Do I have time?
Yes.
But to Julia's question, I don't know that we've got a water problem. I'm hearing that we do not. I'm hearing that there's a lot of water, but then I hear, well, maybe Ferndale, one of the wells in Ferndale is going dry. Well, that's not representative of everything. I think of it in terms of, like, if you look at the topography under the earth, maybe we put a straw down right here where there was some kind of level, but then the aquifer keeps going down here. Like, we don't know how big this is. So let's figure that out. And I think that this next 40 years of our existence is going to help determine that. Let's talk about the rules of the game. And this is where I would like to be fact checked as to whether or not this is right or not. The average person who's out in the county, who's on a well, the average has been set by some scientist, and they think it's about 3,000 gallons of water per day draw on a typical well. I don't know if that's true or not. You can tell me. Let's say it's 3 to 5,000 gallons per day. That individual is being told through this water rights adjudication process that they've got to figure out where all of the records and all of the things were from decades before that led up to the fact that they have those rights today. I sometimes lose my car keys. How am I supposed to find a document that's written before the internet that tells me that I have the water rights that I've got, and that I'm using the water and I'm tracking the water that I've used, that it's somewhere between this tolerance or this level? How do you do that for someone who has lived on 5 acres and it's been passed down through the family? Perhaps it's been, the property's been bought and sold. Maybe the documentation doesn't exist or there. One group of individuals is in a highly advantageous position because they've got the federal agencies, and they've got the municipalities who have inchoate rights that are able to just document all of that. The municipalities are really, really good at keeping records. The average Joe like me, where are my car keys? So that's a huge issue. And then it's the tolerances. We're talking about water rights because we're talking about stream levels and flow rates and all of the rest. Well, some of the studies that were done were referencing Port Townsend and some of the areas out there. And this is where I need some fact checking from you, Julia. When you look at the flow rates in the streams, my understanding is that low points have now become the averages. So where's the fairness in that, right? Like, let's talk about the truth. Let's be transparent and honest with numbers. And then having these things artificially, set low, or for whatever reason they were set low as low points, why was that done? And is that the right way to measure? Yakima Basin is in a high plains desert. That was adjudicated over some 35 years. They call it the Aquavella because that was the first, poor guy on the top of the list. They have more water draw per gallon than we do out here with this giant aquifer underneath our feet, and of course next to the Salish Sea. So, where are we starting from? I want to answer those questions. I want us to figure out where's the right starting point and what's there. To Ron's earlier question, which is, how do you do this? Are there alternatives? You never want to think out loud with a newspaper, but maybe we need to go back to where we started and what got us to this point, and come together and say, this is who we are as Whatcom County. It's not neighbor against neighbor. It's not us versus them. It's not political ideology against political ideology, but rather it's, hey, do we really want to do this? Do we really want to embark on the state, on another level of government that we don't control or even influence it sometimes? Do we want to let them come in here and and be the referee for these problems that we're having, why don't we all come back to the table and talk about where our sticking points are and try to figure out a settlement, try to figure out amongst neighbors how we conduct our business. And maybe we can avoid this, I don't know.
Do you think that's realistic?
The problem that I have with it being realistic or not is that I haven't been an insider in these conversations. So I feel like I'm playing catch up. And so I'm talking to insiders now, and they're catching me up very quickly. I just don't know if the bonds are broken. I don't know if we can get to that trust relationship because I wasn't the guy. But I'll sure try. I'll tell you what.
Okay.
This comes down to a negotiation, and if all parties, and here's the real if all parties will address this as we don't want there to be 24,000 defendants, and we don't want, there's this strata of who gets what first, because that's going to upset a lot of people. And I think you're going to see, again, we're not talking about surface water rights anymore, we're talking about groundwater rights. That is a completely different animal which hasn't been legislated yet, so we're in new territory. If that's the case, Whatcom County is going to be a case study for college students for decades. And we may or may not show up well. We may or may not have the resources and the attorneys and the legal guidance and advice at a city level, at a county level, at a tribe level, at a personal residence and landowner level, and for sure at a farm level, at an ag ranch, farm level. I think that we're way out of our league when it comes to this. And I frankly don't want us to have to go through this. I think that as neighbors, we can come together and try to work this out one more time, maybe two more times if we have to. But I don't think any of us want this. And I don't think any of us know whether or not this is a silver bullet or a smoking gun. None of us are going to be able to predict this. It's going to take so many twists and turns. And if I can just talk to the tribes for a moment, investigate what happened down in Southern California recently. There was a shot across the bow as it pertained to the government coming in and talking to those specific industries that were there. My understanding, my very cursory understanding of the tribe's rights under the treaty are that you have the right to fish, you have the right to industries and sustain your people and all the rest. And we support that as a county, as a city, as neighbors. What was done in Southern California, however, was more around the ancillary businesses that were there, including the casinos, including some of the larger and the more robust businesses that have since been developed. And the government is not looking favorably upon that. So if we can come back together, sit down, talk about things, I think that we can avoid some of these things. I just don't know how far gone we are.
Okay. We could have a 2-hour discussion on water rights, no doubt.
Exactly.
Cynthia, anything?
Well, I always like to know why people run for office. You're very passionate about a lot of subjects, but was there something that triggered, okay, this year I'm running? What triggered your decision to run for office?
Yeah, I get that question.
In this office.
I get that question a lot. My wife will say it's the insanity gene that runs through my family. I'm just, like that guy, just doing things like that. But the truth is, there's two reasons. The first is, I took the college track. I went the route of becoming highly educated, and I didn't do any public service in terms of military, like my father and my two grandfathers did. And in my family, our coat of arms, our conduct is all around honor and respect and some of those principles that have been passed down through the generations. It's an honorable thing to serve as a public servant. It's the right thing to do. It's what we do. Now, the other reason is because I feel like I've been asleep for several years, and things have gotten out of control in terms of the COVID disaster and the way that was handled at all levels of government, but then also with some of the things that are up and coming at the national level. And the reason I chose the county executive office is because that is the CEO position. In fact, in the Whatcom County Charter, it says under Section 3.2, under Article 3, the county executive is the chief executive officer of the county. And those 11 words are really important because my opponent doesn't see it like that. And then under section 3.22, it says, as Chief Executive Officer, and then it goes into some of the more duties. We got a guy in office right now that doesn't even understand the role that he's been elected to. And I think that's dishonorable and disrespectful. And that cuts against my very moral fiber. It cuts against my DNA and how I've been raised. And that is where I have the most influence to be able to effectuate positive change for you, for me, for my family, for everyone else out here. That's where it all goes. In addition to that, I've got the resume, for this position. I mentioned earlier I've worked for 5 Fortune 500 companies, and in the procurement and supply chain management world, where I spent over 18 years and 25 years of experience, those are highly stressful, detailed jobs that require people with certain characteristics and skill sets. Not everyone can do that role. And fortunately, with my mentors, I was led in that direction and in that path because they saw who I was even as a young man. In addition to that, I've owned 4 businesses and sold 2. And for the folks who have gone through that entrepreneurial experience, it's a completely different breed of individuals. I work for a company now that is one of the largest small business advisories in North America. We've got roughly $1 billion under management of client revenues. And when you're talking with entrepreneurs and owners and founders of businesses every day, you start to align with their mentality because it's your own. And everybody wants to grow the pie. No one is competing for, scarce resources. They're all saying in terms of, how can I create more jobs? How can I, disrupt this technology for better, technologies? How can we move away from this to get to that? That's what we're talking in terms of, is these strategic directions. And that's exactly what the county needs at this point in time, is we need a stronger strategic direction. I wrote a book back in 2017 about personal strategic planning. And that's what I use to coach and mentor my 30 teenagers every week. So I just feel like I'm the right person for this role. And I believe that this is the time for us to take a stronger direction. America is about to celebrate its 250th anniversary during this tenure, in this term. And I totally intend to be the guy who is talking about Gateway to America and celebrating our history, our country, and our legacy here in Whatcom County.
Okay, well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's discussions like this that keep democracy functioning.
Yeah.
We need the press to cover campaigns, but most importantly, we need candidates who are willing to make the sacrifice. And I know the sacrifices are intense, especially when it comes to your families. So thank you for being a candidate and being a part of the democratic process.
Happy to do it. Thanks
for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Cheers.